the camp itself. Can everyone hear me if I don't have this thing? Yeah. Okay, sorry, it's just really distracting.
It's too far.
Oh, okay. I feel like I'm going cross-eyed staring at it. Okay, so what is the Unist'ot'en Camp? Presumably all of us here have some awareness of it. But in its simplest explanation, it is a pipeline blockade. The land of the Unist'ot'en, who are a clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, lies directly in the path of I think 7 proposed pipelines that are sort of on the record, and as many as like 18 that are currently being floated around. The three ones that are closest to fruition or to being built are the Enbridge pipeline, a Trans-Canada pipeline, and most pressingly, the Pacific Trails pipeline, which would transport liquefied fracked gas to port in an LNG terminal in Kitimat, which has not yet been built. But more than a pipeline blockade, it's also a movement. It's a back to the land movement. It's an attempt to decolonize the Wet'suwet'en people, to undo all of the years of harm that our colonial system of government has put on them, and fundamentally it's a healing movement led by a powerful woman, Frida Huson. And just to give you a sense of how effective their actions have been, over the course of this past year, Al Jazeera Plus has named them their number 2 hero for the year. So the number 1 heroes, according to Al Jazeera Plus, were the Ferguson, Hong Kong, and Mexico protesters. So these are massive protests that have shaken the world. And then number 2 is the Unist'ot'en blockade. Wow. So once we hit the streets in the same kinds of numbers that they are in Ferguson and Hong Kong and Mexico City, then this will be a movement that will transform the world. It just goes to show how powerful it is to put people on the ground and have them speaking their truth and standing up for what they know is right. For the coming year, there are some construction plans, and perhaps Dave and Virginia, if you have any questions, you can talk to them. But in addition to the bunkhouse, which was built over the course of this past year, the next phase would be to build a healing center, which would be 3 times the size of the bunkhouse. And the first phase of that particular construction would be to build a kitchen, dining hall, and some sleeping space. And the cost for this is estimated currently at about $40,000. The work camp would be in May, and there will be a website gearing up in a month. So if you're interested in this, please look it up on the internet and stay in touch, because this is a project that will need some support over the middle to long term as well, and it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, so I think everyone here in this room is pretty much on side, and we know that the government and we know that industry cannot be trusted. But overwhelmingly, I think in the city of Vancouver, I feel as I go about my life that people generally have a sense that all of this stuff cannot be stopped. That being said, construction on the Pacific Trails pipeline has been delayed for over a year, and all of the original investors have pulled out. And this is a result of the strength of the Unist'ot'en Action, of the blockade. Now the only remaining investor is Chevron, and they have a wonderful reputation for decimating indigenous lands in Ecuador and cheating them out of the money that they were legally awarded in settlement, for supporting a government that kills workers in Kazakhstan, and just wreaking havoc across the globe, and we cannot allow them to do the same thing on unceded Wet'suwet'en land. So if you feel like giving Chevron a call and giving them a piece of your mind, their phone number is 604-668-5300. I'm serious. If you want to write it down and call them, be my guest.
Are they in the phone book?
I don't know. I only use Google. So the security state loves me.
We'll post it on the Facebook event page for this time.
Unist'ot'en.go.
Yeah, it's my homepage. But anyway, but my internet browsing habits are neither here nor there. But I do want to briefly talk about an experience that I had. I was lucky enough to spend some time at the Unist'ot'en Camp last winter, so almost a year ago. And I was up there with a bunch of vegetarians, and every day, or almost every day, we would walk the trap lines, and we would check for pine martens or other animals that had been caught in the snares. This was about a 5-hour hike on snowshoes through some really beautiful, pristine territory. It was just a really incredible chance to experience the land that they're defending. And I was up there to do an interview with Frida for a web publication, and so one day Togastai suggested that I bring my camera along on the trap lines, and so I did. And my comrade from Rising Tide was also walking the trap line with me on this day. And at one of the traps, we came to a pine marten that was caught and had its neck broken or its back broken, and it was like seriously injured, but it wasn't dead yet. And we didn't know what to do, or never having experienced something like this. And I was taking pictures, but Togastai asked Cody, my comrade, do you want to take its life, which is a serious responsibility. And Cody said, oh, I don't know if I can. Cody is a vegetarian. He cared strongly about the animal, but ultimately, I think he realized it was a responsibility and an honor, and so he did. And what you do is once you've released the marten from the trap line, you take your thumbs and you press its rib cage, like right here in its sort of solar plexus area, and you keep applying pressure until you can feel its heart stop beating, and so you're really just feeling the life seep out of it. And the whole time, to do it appropriately, you would be talking to its spirit and praying to it and sort of giving it back to the land. And as Togastai pointed out, it's about respect. It's about respect for the pine marten as a fellow creature, not as an animal that's from a kingdom below us. It's in dealing with it this way, you're treating it as your equal. And so ultimately, Cody sort of screwed up the nerve to do this. But the emotions were extremely high. You could feel this current of just energy sort of pulsing around, and I was standing there with my camera taking pictures, and I started crying. The lens finder the viewfinder fogged up in my camera, and it was a very it was a life-changing moment for I think both Cody and myself. On the way back, we stopped at a crossing of Gosnell Creek to get a drink, and you can drink straight from the water there. And a lot of people have spoken about the incredible pure taste of Wedzin-Kwa, which is the Morris River that runs right by the cabin. But the creeks, some of the creeks that are sort of tributaries, are also very clean, and you can drink straight from them. And as we were lying perched over the snowy bank, Togastai pointed out that where we were right then, where the trapline that we had walked that day, was along the right-of-way of the Enbridge pipeline. And so if there were a bitumen spill, all the life in that area would have been wiped out. And so he said, they have never given up their land, but they do live off of it, and they trap along it, and they hunt and all of these things, and they can do that to prove to Indian Act enforcers that they've been continuously occupying it. And as Togastai said, we don't give a shit about their colonial laws, but we'll fight them with whatever we have to, and with whatever we have, and we will fight them on all of these fronts, and we'll win. But ultimately, though, as you can see today from what happened, we are protecting this land for him, for the pine marten. We're protecting it, and we take his life in this way to sustain our movement so that they can live in the long term, in the future. So it is about a different approach to our relationship with our fellow living creatures and our surrounds, but it it's besieged on all sides. I don't know if any of you were following the drama this past week in Morristown, but the First Nations Limited Partnership is trying to get the Morristown Band, which is the last of the Wet'suwet'en bands, to hold out on signing an agreement with Pacific Trails. They're trying to get them to sign an agreement that will say that the band cannot fight the pipeline companies in court, nor will it be able to support actions impeding the pipeline's proponents. This means that if they sign this agreement, families will literally be divided because people who are in the band will not be able to support their relatives who are living on the land and fighting the pipelines. And so that's a result of the legal system that we've imposed, and through which a lot of these things are governed. The FNLP, the First Nations Limited Partnership, is Chevron's Pacific Trails Pipelines First Nations Coalition, and it's headed by none other than Bob Rae. Some of you might remember this past summer that Bob Rae wrote an editorial in the Globe and Mail on the subject of the Chilcotin decision. And he basically said, oh, this is a wonderful decision. It shows that we respect, the state is finally respecting our First Nations. And it was, he's someone who's very good at saying all the right things on the surface and then doing something, and talking out of both sides of his mouth. But you can see from his actions and from his role in this FNLP that what he really is trying to do is divide families, pit First Nations against each other, and we cannot let that happen. And just to emphasize the duplicitous nature of this man, as NDP leader of Ontario, Bob Rae chained himself to old-growth forest in Temagami, and the second he left office, he went to work for the same Bay Street firm that represented the logging company. So he cannot be trusted, and if you'd like to let him know what you think about him. His Twitter handle is @BobRae48. So if you want to scrawl something obscene on his Twitter account, I certainly encourage you to do so. So what I do want to say is that all of these little stories can show us, can paint a picture of the challenge for us as a group of predominantly settlers. And the challenge is, I think, that we need to come together and we need to stand together and provide a solid bulwark so that the Unist'ot'en can continue doing the incredibly important work that they're doing, so that they and all of us can cultivate the kinds of social relations, the kinds of relations among living creatures that capitalist society does its best to splinter. So, thank you again for being here tonight, and I'm going to turn you over to David Rovics.